Hello, today we're going to talk about the second video in our Hitler chapter, and I call this It Begins. So the overall topic is how did international relationships break down by 1939? And this is the build-up to what happened to really allow Hitler to be able to take over. So here we go. Get out your paper and pen and write that down, and we'll move on to the first slide. So the Wall Street crash happened in 1929. You would have learned about this in Chapter 10 in our USA Depth study. But basically what happened is the stock market, the Börse, it totally lost all value, and therefore all the economies went down, and it led to a great depression all over the world. We also talk about this in the chapter 2, which is one reason why in the 1930s the League of Nations was not very successful. These economic problems were really bad all over, not just in America, and ordinary people lost their jobs, they couldn't support their family, they didn't worry about what was going on to other people. And so in Germany, they were turning to extreme political parties such as the Nazi Party because they were saying the normal democratic system of government was not working. So if you need review on the Wall Street crash, definitely take a look in my USA Depth Studies video or look into the Chapter 2. But all you need to know for Chapter 3 is that the economy got very severe because of the crash, and countries were not caring about other countries, and the people in Germany were turning to new political parties, such as the Nazis. So go ahead and write that down. This slide you can also write in your own words if you do not wish to write word for word these long sentences. Okay, pause here and I'll go on to the next slide. Okay, the Disarmament Conference in 1932 to 1934 is also discussed in the Chapter 2, 1930s, the successes and failures of the 1930s. The League basically was talking how it wanted all of the countries to disarm. Germany had started being in the League of Nations in 1926, and people by 1932 had really believed that Germany was a good country and should be treated fairly. They'd been with them about 5-6 years. And so Germany, Hitler said, okay, you guys have two choices. Either everyone disarm to me or allow me to rearm to you, because it's unfair that we are such differences. And when France really refused, Hitler basically said, okay, I am not going to be here, and so he left the League of Nations. Now, I personally believe that Hitler would have found any excuse that he could have in order to leave the League of Nations after Japan had left the year before. And so this was probably just a nice thing that he can use, because it actually is quite unfair. If Germany is a good country and they should be respected and they should be treated equally. So I have double asterisk right here. This is the reason Hitler left the League of Nations, since France refused to disarm. So now I've got a little cartoon here, the Sermon on the Mount. That is a play on the Sermon on the Mount, which is a sermon that Jesus did. So is it poverty or peace, armaments or bread? The World Disarmament Conference. Because if money is all being spent on armaments, it's hard to feed your people. We'll be talking a lot more in that on Chapter 6 when we talk about the Cold War. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. The Tsar in 1935. If you remember from Chapter 2, the League of Nations, the Saarland was going to be not independent, but it's its own area that would be ruled basically by the League of Nations, and in 15 years after the Treaty of Versailles, they would be able to have a plebiscite to decide which side they would join. Now, please remember, a plebiscite is a vote of the people, the plebs, the plebeians. Okay, so when it's a plebiscite being held, that means the people can decide. Okay, so 15 years later, they had a vote, and they voted that it was going to be part of Germany. So I want to show you this map here. So here, right here is the Saar. Here is the Rhineland, the demilitarized area. Here is the Ruhr, and so when we talked about the failure of the League of Nations, here's the part that was invaded. Later we'll talk about the Sudetenland. So just a little forecast what Sudetenland is. And then this is what the German territories. And you can't see what's going on up here, but you remember there's the Polish corridor and then the other half of Germany over here. So basically the Tsar is what I was wanting to show you right there between the Rhineland and Alsace-Lorraine. Okay, so Hitler found this as a great triumph, and I mean it was. 90% of the population wanted to come back to Germany. It basically tells Hitler, yes, Germans want to be part of Germany. They don't want to go to another country. You know, the Tsar did not want to become French. They wanted to stay German. And so that really uphold his idea of the Große Deutschland, that everyone who's an ethnic German would want to be a German. So the other thing I'd want to point out, as far as we believe, or as we know, that it was an actual fair vote, and that really is what happened. Okay, so I just want to show you a picture right here. Here's a picture of the Tsar, what it was looking like at the time of that plebiscite. Okay, pause here and take these notes if you have not already done so, and I'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is something new that I have found, and I only have found something like this for chapter 3. I found this when I was Googling information, because I always like to refresh myself and see if I can find any other information that can help you do better on all your tests. So in all of chapter 3, I have labeled these helpful tips. Okay, and so you do not have to write this down, but this will be available in the Google Slides, so you can see it, or you can take a screenshot, pause the video and take a screenshot. What this is, it gives you an explanation of how to get a different grade level. So when you describe something, it gives you a grade C. So you can read this. I'll read this one with you. The industrial area around the Tsar was removed from Germany by the Treaty of Versailles and put under control of the League of Nations. And a plebiscite, a vote among the German people, is to be held 15 years to decide whether it should be returned to Germany. So that's just your basic describe facts. If you describe, you can achieve a level C. So when you explain, that gets you up to a level B. So that gives you more details. In January 1935, 90% of the people voted in favor of returning to Germany. 8% wanted to remain under the control of the League, and 2% wanted to join France. So that gives you a little more explanation of the vote. So the vote is describing, and then you explain it, and that can get you up to a B. The events in the Tsar were not an example of Hitler breaking the Treaty of Versailles or even of him confronting international community, but this were a major step in his build-up to World War II. So that explains what it is. So that will give you a grade B. Now when you assess it, it gives you a grade A. The Nazi Party celebrated the plebiscite resulting as a victory of the treaty. Here it says it was a victory. Here it says they say how that victory impacted them. Greeted with huge celebration in Germany. One historian stated that the greatest triumph of the Nazis is in a free election. Massive boost to Hitler prestige. Remember, like I said, this was a free election. That's what they believed. Unlike other elections that we'll talk about later that are kind of rigged. It showed that Germans outside Germany hated the Treaty of Versailles and loved Germany more than they feared Hitler. It gave moral authority to Hitler's claims on Austria and the Sudetenland. The Nazi Party presented it as the first of the injustice of the Versailles to be removed, and the return of the Tsar was not illegal. Hitler had kept within the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. So, this tells you the low-level facts. This here then goes up a little higher and explains, and this brings your own assessment in it, your own thoughts. This here was not written anywhere. The person had to come up with what they assessed by the explanations and the descriptions. So, like I say, there are a lot of these. I will not go through any of the other ones in depth like this. If you have any questions about the other ones, just let me know. And here's also, can you spell? It'll give you a couple of key terms to make sure you can spell them right. Again, like I say, you do not have to write any of this down. I suggest you could either take a picture or also you can go into the slides and then you can use that. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. Bye-bye.